Hello everyone, so work continues on the Astronaut. This is part 2 of the series where we're going to basically continue working on the air tanks and bean tanks a little bit more and adding a bit of a chest plate and some finger details and working on some balancing issues.
Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well and thank you for tuning into StopMotion. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, and be sure you have your post notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the new content. Anyway, thank you for your support, it's highly appreciated.
So the first thing we're going to do here is just bulk up the spacesuit just ever so slightly. We'll probably end up doing that later on in a future standpoint. Because, well, I noticed, well, most spacesuits are fairly bulky in stature and, well, it's not exactly a jumpsuit, so we're going to add a few more layers before continuing on building the rest of this Astronaut. And yes, for those of you who are new and perhaps just tuning into the series, that's not a mistype. This guy will be flying through space through fault propulsion, so you might want to catch up on the first episode. During the end of the video, I give a brief description as to what the entire cartoon concept for this character is going to be. Now we're going to move on to, well, the air pack, or kind of like a jetpack replica, what, well, most astronauts basically have strapped to their back, but in this case it's going to be more or less an air tank because, well, he has two bean tanks that will be attached to this air pack for propulsion. He doesn't need a jetpack. Any rate, we're going to use aluminum foil for, well, the base just to keep things nice and light so that way he doesn't have tipping over issues while he's trying to stand on different planets that he's going to be making, well, trips to while he's flying around through farts. And then we're just going to cover things up with a nice oven-baked clay layer, so that way we can stick it in the oven and it's a nice hard base and it's something that I can actually work with, well, placing my hands on and just having some a little bit more, well, stability and not having to worry about what's called a boiling effect, which is essentially when your plasticine starts moving around a lot more than you'd actually want during the animation process, which basically looks like something boiling and moving around in undesirable aspects, and basically there's a lot of resculpting, which is generally not a lot of fun to do. So now we're moving on to, well, a set of bean tanks, which will be filled with various different types of beans, which, well, he will be using as fuel, as consumption for, well, for propulsion through space. So now we're going to fill in some of the, well, actual, like, holes or kind of, like, low spots, and just kind of fill in the blanks so that way there's a little less sanding and things look a little bit more spacey and, well, smooth and not so, well, hand-built, essentially. And this process is being taken place after the, well, first round of baking, so that way essentially you're not smushing and re-sculpting everything. So essentially you're just putting on a very thin layer of oven-baked clay on top of what you've already put on, just kind of smoothing things out, getting the low spots just kind of, well, to a point where it's a little bit more level, and if they're actually even a little bit higher than the rest, that's probably a good thing because, well, it's easier to take away material than it is to actually add it on, even when you have a belt sander to make things a little bit easier. But given these shapes of these bean tanks and the jetpack tank slash air tank, it's not going to be, unfortunately, that easy to do on the belt sander, so there's going to be some hand sanding required in regards to whether or not I actually enjoy doing that or not. So now that those things are back in the oven, it's time to, well, work on the stability issue with our little astronaut character here. So what I basically tried doing with the actual frame in episode 1 was kind of not do any sort of feet because I have bad issues with ankles breaking a lot of the time, and then it just kind of serves no purpose. So I tried getting away with not actually doing any, well, bones essentially for the feet, which unfortunately I've noticed hasn't really worked out. This guy's been falling on his face an awful lot off camera, so I decided to give a little bit more, well, support and bracing in the feet by giving just a little bit of oven-baked clay bricks. And now that those are done, we're going to move on to sculpting some hands for this astronaut, which we'll do some fairly thick fingers on because I personally hate working with tiny fingers because, well, that's not exactly very fun and easy to work with when things and digits start falling off and you have to replace things on set. I can't emphasize enough how much of a pain in the butt it is to do that, but that's sometimes the nature of, well, claymation, unfortunately. But it depends on the size of your character, and given that this guy's slightly bigger, he is going to be a little less prone to damage than some of my other characters that I have worked with in the past and I have made. So if you're ever making your stop motion dolls, bear in mind that generally sometimes slightly bigger is kind of better, although going too big can also be, well, a problem too, which is a whole entire issue that I have with my dinosaurs. And if you'd like to see them, check out the, well, links in the description and you'll find more videos there that you'll probably enjoy. Now that the oven is all done, we're going to sand things down just a little bit on the belt sander to save myself some time and grief instead of hand sanding, which is kind of an unavoidable process, unfortunately, with these weird shaped parts. So yeah, that kind of sucks because that's kind of why I bought this thing, because I hate hand sanding, but it's sometimes a necessary evil when you're building things, and it's, yeah. In the end, it's definitely worth it, but just something that I generally am not a huge fan of, and there's a few tricks up my sleeve that I'll show you later in the video to kind of help make sure things stay perfectly smooth, where, well, basically my sculpting background kind of meets my car background with being a bit of an auto body guy. So I show you a few different tricks that you can apply to sculpting as well as your car, essentially. Sweetie. Yeah, there you go.
No, honey. Cargo. I'm sorry. Thank you.
So now that I've all introduced you to my German Shepherd named Holly, it's time to, well, kind of reveal this little auto body trick, essentially. Now what I'm using on these, well, oven-baked clay pieces is called sandable primer, or you can also get one that's slightly thicker called filler. And, well, the nice thing about this primer is that it's essentially kind of like auto body Bondo, so you can basically use it to kind of like fill in gaps and even things out to the point where you can barely even see it or notice it or even feel it with your hands. As you can see, it kind of looks a little splotchy, but in the end, it, well, definitely makes sure that whatever it is you're building is perfectly smooth. So I personally really like this stuff, and I kind of wish that I thought about using this stuff sooner for my sculpting projects. Although, generally speaking, I think I'm probably one of the few sculptors that are using auto body tricks for their projects. So yeah, there's a little trick for you that I'm probably one of the few people in the world using, so maybe that can be a new trend for some sculptors, using some auto body materials. And for those of you who are following with the text, well, there's an awful lot of paint layers on there to try and hide that sandable primer, because it does kind of, well, stick through. I probably should have had a extra layer of primer. What I'll probably end up doing is just getting some spray paint, so it just kind of covers things up a little bit better. But I live in the middle of nowhere, and I'm doing this on a Sunday, so nothing is open, unfortunately. So we're going to move on to making a little chest plate, because I notice a lot of astronauts that, well, have spacesuits have generally little control boards on the very front of their, well, chest with various switches and stuff like that. Now, unfortunately, I'm not a massive space geek, and I'm not entirely sure what any of this stuff does. And I probably just should have done a little bit more homework before doing the actual voiceover, but I'm doing this at 11 o'clock at night before I have to go to bed and go back to 9 to 5. So that's going to wrap up this episode, because I do eventually have to get some sleep tonight. So we will continue on this adventure with, well, more episodes. Unfortunately, I was hoping to have this guy wrapped up a little faster because he's a human, basically. But unfortunately, things have been a little hectic and a little busy lately. I had a wedding to attend to this weekend, so that's why I wasn't able to post anything on YouTube this weekend, and a little late behind that. But it definitely was fun, and well, it was definitely worth it. There was definitely a lot of fun and a lot of new people to meet. So, at any rate, back to, well, various other business now. Unfortunately, there is some bad news. I have lost access to my TikTok account, and now a vast majority of my subscribers are actually from there. So I apologize for the lack of posting there. I unfortunately have no other way of actually telling you apart from my YouTube channel at the moment. So I'm doing my best to recover things, but I'm fortunately not entirely sure how long that is going to take, because, well, TikTok has got next to no support, and unfortunately I've had issues with my YouTube channel where I've lost access to it before and was able to get it back fairly quickly, but this is proving to be much more of a pain in the rear. So be sure to like the video if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, because that's the best way to support me at the moment. Anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy.